A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Herman, I was looking at the top shelf of your closet the other day while I was looking for those extra light bulbs, the ones for the hallway that always seem to burn out at the most inconvenient times, and I couldn't help but notice a very familiar, very fuzzy face staring back at me from behind your old college textbooks and that stack of research journals.
Ah, you found Barnaby. I suppose the secret is out now. Herman Poppleberry, professional researcher, occasional policy analyst, and lifelong guardian of a slightly moth-eaten, definitely well-loved corduroy bear. I was wondering if he'd catch your eye eventually. He's been my silent co-author on many a late-night paper, even if he hasn't moved from that shelf in a few years.
I'm not judging. Not in the slightest. In fact, it's actually perfect timing because our housemate Daniel sent us a prompt this week that dives right into that exact phenomenon. He was curious about why so many full-grown adults still keep plushies or stuffed animals in their lives, where these things even came from historically, and how we handle the slightly awkward conversation with our kids when they start asking why Dad has a stuffed elephant on his nightstand or a corduroy bear in his closet.
It is a fascinating topic, Corn, and honestly, it is way more common than people think. We tend to treat it like a private quirk or something we should be embarrassed about, a secret we keep tucked away behind the serious books. But the data suggests that for a huge chunk of the population, the transitional object never really goes away. It just moves from the center of the bed to the top of the closet, or in some cases stays right there on the pillow, even as we navigate the professional world of 2026.
Well, let's start with the scale of this, because when Daniel sent this over, I did a little digging into the current numbers. It turns out that about 40% of adults in the United States report still having some kind of childhood comfort object. And in the last couple of years, especially as we have moved through 2025 and into 2026, there's been this massive surge in what the industry calls kidult consumerism. It's not just a niche thing anymore, it's a multi-billion-dollar driver of the global economy.
Kidult consumerism. It sounds like a marketing term for arrested development, but there is actually a lot of depth to it. A survey from the Toy Association back in 2024 found that 35% of adults had purchased a toy for themselves in the last year. And we are not just talking about collectible action figures or complex Lego sets that look good on a shelf. A huge portion of that market is plush. We're seeing adults actively seeking out softness.
Right. And I think we need to distinguish between the collector who buys a rare item to put in a glass case, the person who is looking for an investment or a pristine piece of nostalgia, and the person who actually uses a stuffed animal for comfort. Those are two very different psychological profiles, even if the object itself looks the same. One is about curation, the other is about regulation.
One is about financial investment or perhaps a sense of identity through ownership, while the other is about emotional regulation, and that is where the concept of the transitional object comes in. This is a term coined by the British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott back in the middle of the 20th century. He argued that these objects serve as a bridge between the child's internal world and the external reality. They are the first not-me possession that still feels like me.
So, for a toddler, the blanket or the bear represents the mother's comfort when she is not there. It is the first thing the child possesses that is not the parent, but is also not quite the cold, hard reality of the outside world. It's a safety buffer.
That is a perfect way to put it. It is an intermediate area of experience, and the question Daniel's prompt raises is, why does that need persist? If we are healthy, functioning adults living here in Jerusalem, navigating the complexities of 2026, why do we still need that bridge? Why haven't we finished crossing it?
I think some people would jump straight to the idea of regression. You know, the idea that we are just refusing to grow up, or that we are seeking a safe harbor from a world that feels increasingly volatile. Given the state of global politics, the economic shifts we've seen recently, and the rapid shifts in technology we have discussed in past episodes, I can see why someone would want to hug something that doesn't have an opinion on the latest election or the newest artificial intelligence regulations.
That is certainly part of it, but I think the regression label is a bit of a lazy critique. It's a way to dismiss a genuine human need by calling it childish. If you look at the neurobiology of it, there is something much more fundamental happening. When we touch something soft and familiar, our bodies actually respond at a cellular level. Tactile comfort triggers the release of oxytocin, which is often called the cuddle hormone, and it simultaneously lowers our levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone.
So it is essentially a low-tech biohack for the nervous system. We're using a physical object to trick our brains into a state of calm.
Precisely. We live in a world that is increasingly digital, cold, and high friction in terms of social interaction. We spend our days touching glass screens and plastic keyboards. A plush object provides a consistent, non-judgmental, physical sensation of safety. It is a sensory anchor. And honestly, humans have been looking for those anchors for a long time, though the form they take has changed quite a bit as our manufacturing capabilities evolved.
Well, that leads us right into the history. I was actually surprised to learn that the mass-produced plush toy is a relatively recent invention in the grand scheme of human history. Before the late 19th century, children certainly had dolls or wooden toys, but they weren't necessarily the soft, cuddly companions we think of today. You didn't really have plush in the way we understand it.
Right. The origin story of the modern plushie actually starts with a complete accident in 1880. There was a German seamstress named Margaret Steiff. She had contracted polio as a child and was confined to a wheelchair, but she was an incredibly talented needleworker. She found a pattern for a small stuffed elephant in a fashion magazine called Modenwelt. It was meant to be a pincushion.
Wait, so the first mass-produced plushie was actually meant to be a piece of sewing equipment? You were supposed to stick needles in it.
It was an 1880 elephant pincushion made of felt. But what happened was that the children in her town saw these little felt elephants and absolutely fell in love with them. They didn't want to stick pins in them, they wanted to carry them around and sleep with them. Margaret noticed this, and within a few years her company, Steiff, was producing thousands of felt animals specifically designed as toys. She realized that the cuddle factor was a market that didn't even exist yet.
It is amazing how often a major cultural shift starts as a complete fluke. But the real explosion, the one that gave us the icon of the stuffed animal, didn't happen until a couple of decades later with the teddy bear. And that story is almost too perfect to be true.
Oh, the teddy bear story is a classic bit of American folklore that actually has a lot of truth to it. It goes back to November of 19002. President Theodore Roosevelt was on a hunting trip in Onward, Mississippi. His assistants had cornered and tied up a black bear for him to shoot, but Roosevelt refused, saying it would be unsportsmanlike to shoot a captive animal.
Which is very on brand for Teddy Roosevelt. He was a man of high principles, even in the woods, and he understood the power of his public image.
A political cartoonist named Clifford Berryman drew a cartoon of the incident, titled Drawing the Line in Mississippi, which became famous across the country. In Brooklyn, a candy shop owner named Morris Mictum saw the cartoon and had a brilliant idea. His wife Rose made 2 stuffed bears out of plush velvet, and they put them in the shop window with a sign that said Teddy's Bear.
And with the president's permission, I assume. I can't imagine using a sitting president's name for a toy without asking.
He did actually write to Roosevelt asking for permission to use the name, and the president reportedly said he didn't think his name would be worth much in the bear business, but Mictum was welcome to use it. Little did he know that Mictum would go on to found the Ideal Novelty and Toy Company, and the teddy bear would become a global phenomenon that would outlast almost every other policy from the Roosevelt administration.
It is interesting that the rise of the plushie coincides almost perfectly with the peak of the Industrial Revolution. We moved from an agrarian society where children were often working alongside their parents to an urban, industrial one where the concept of childhood started to be protected and sentimentalized. We created a space for play that was separate from work.
That is a deep insight, Corn. As the world became more mechanical, rigid, and soot-covered, we created these hyper-soft, organic-shaped objects to balance it out. We essentially manufactured comfort to combat the stresses of modernity, and you see that continuing today. Look at the rise of things like squishmallows in the early 2020s.
Oh man, squishmallows are everywhere. I think they are the defining toy of the last 5 or 6 years. I see them in dorm rooms, in offices, and definitely in the back of people's cars.
They really are. And if you look at why they are popular with adults, it is not just the cute factor. It is the specific tactile quality. They are made of a polyester spandex blend that feels almost like a marshmallow or a very soft cloud. In a world of glass screens and plastic gadgets, that specific physical feedback is incredibly soothing. It is what psychologists call anthropomorphic projection. We give these objects personalities and names, and in return, they provide a low-stakes form of social connection.
Low stakes is the key word there. A stuffed animal doesn't require anything from you. It doesn't need to be walked like a dog or fed like a cat. It doesn't have political disagreements with you. It doesn't ask you for a raise or remind you of your deadlines. It is just there, providing a consistent sensory experience.
Right? But that leads to the second part of Daniel's prompt, which is the tension that arises when we feel like we have to hide this part of ourselves, especially for parents. There is this weird shame trap where an adult feels like they have to maintain this persona of absolute maturity and realism for their children. They feel like they have to be the source of comfort, not a seeker of it.
It is the fear of being caught in a lie, I think. We tell our kids that their toys are their friends, but then we also have to teach them the difference between what is alive and what is inanimate. And if a parent is still holding on to their own stuffed animal, they worry it will confuse the child or, worse, undermine their authority as the grown-up who knows how the world works. They don't want to look weak or childish in the eyes of someone who is looking to them for stability.
I think that fear is largely misplaced. If anything, being honest about why we keep these objects can be a huge boost for a child's emotional intelligence. We actually touched on some related themes back in episode 517 when we talked about the 12-foot mattress and the family bed debate. It all comes down to how we define comfort and boundaries in the home.
I remember that one. We talked about how the modern Western expectation that everyone should sleep in their own isolated box is actually a historical anomaly. For most of human history, we slept in groups for warmth and safety.
And the plushie is often the substitute for that lost communal warmth. It's a proxy for the presence of another living being. So, if a child finds out that dad has a stuffed bear, the conversation doesn't have to be about whether the bear is alive. It should be about what the bear represents. It's a lesson in symbolism and self-care.
So how do you actually script that conversation? Say your 7-year-old walks into your room and sees the bear you've had since you were 5. They are at that age where they are starting to get skeptical about the magic of childhood. They're looking for the trick.
I think the best approach is radical honesty combined with a lesson on emotional regulation. You can say something like, "Look, I know this bear isn't alive. It doesn't breathe, it doesn't eat, and it doesn't think for itself. But it is very meaningful to me because it has been with me through a lot of big moments in my life. It reminds me of when I was your age, and it helps my brain feel calm when I've had a stressful day at work. Just like your favorite blanket helps you feel safe when there's a thunderstorm, this bear does the same for me."
That is really powerful, because you are moving the conversation from a debate about biology to a discussion about mental health tools. You are essentially modeling for the child that it is okay to have tools that help you manage your feelings, even when you are an adult. You're showing them that growing up doesn't mean you stop needing comfort. It just means you become more aware of how to find it.
Precisely. We often try to rush children out of their attachment to these objects because we think it is a sign of weakness or a delay in development. But if we reframe it as a tool for mental health, the shame disappears. It is not a sign of arrested development. It is a sign of self-awareness. You are saying, "I know that I am a biological creature that responds to touch and nostalgia, and I am choosing to use this object to help myself stay balanced."
It also helps to address the misconception that children will be traumatized if they learn the truth about their toys. Kids are actually much better at navigating the line between fantasy and reality than we give them credit for. They can play a game of make-believe and know it is not real while still being fully emotionally invested in it. They have a foot in both worlds.
They really are experts at that. We talked about this a bit in episode 556 when we looked at the myth of educational toys. Children don't need a toy to teach them calculus. They need toys that allow them to project their own internal worlds. And when they see a parent doing the same thing, it validates their own experience. It tells them that their internal world is valuable and worth protecting even as they get older.
It is also worth considering the cultural context here in Jerusalem and the broader Middle East. We live in a place where history is constantly present, and there is a deep respect for things that have longevity and story. Keeping an object for 30 or 40 years isn't seen as weird here. It is seen as a connection to the past. It's a form of continuity.
That is a great point. In a worldview that values tradition, we value the things that connect the generations. If I can show my child the bear that I had when I was their age, and then show them the bear that maybe their grandfather had, that is a physical manifestation of our family's timeline. It is not just a toy, it is an heirloom of comfort. It's a way of saying we have been safe and loved for a long time.
So, for the parents out there who are feeling that twinge of embarrassment, maybe the first step is to stop calling it a toy and start calling it a transitional object or an emotional anchor. Changing the language can change the way you feel about it. It moves it from the toy box to the medicine cabinet, metaphorically speaking.
And I think we should also talk about the practical side of this, because there is a line between having a meaningful comfort object and falling into pathological hoarding. We have all seen those stories of people whose houses are entirely filled with thousands of stuffed animals to the point where they can't function or use their living space.
Right. That is where it shifts from a tool for regulation to a symptom of a deeper issue. If the objects are replacing human connection rather than supplementing it, or if they're creating a physical barrier to living a healthy life, that is a red flag.
A healthy relationship with a plushie is one where the object serves a specific purpose. Maybe it is for sleeping, or maybe it is something you keep on your desk to squeeze during a difficult conference call. The goal is to curate a collection that adds value to your life rather than just creating clutter. It's about quality of connection, not quantity of fabric.
I like that idea of curation. It is about being intentional. Instead of just keeping every random stuffed animal you've ever been gifted, you hold on to the ones that actually have a narrative or a specific sensory benefit. You treat them with the respect that an anchor deserves.
And for the parents, being transparent about that curation is key. You can explain to your kids why you kept this specific one but gave others away. It teaches them about value, emotional significance, and the idea that we don't have to keep everything to remember everything. It also takes the pressure off them to feel like they have to keep every single toy they ever get.
You know, Herman, as we look toward the future, and we are already seeing this in 2026, this is only going to get more complicated. We are starting to see the integration of large language models and artificial intelligence into plush toys. We are not far from a world where your childhood bear can actually talk back to you, remember your secrets, and offer personalized therapy based on your heart rate.
That is a whole different level of anthropomorphic projection. We are moving from an object that we project our feelings onto to an object that can actually simulate empathy. And honestly, while that has some amazing potential for things like elder care or children with special needs, it also risks blurring the line even further. If the object is smart, does it stop being a transitional object and start being a digital companion?
It makes the realism conversation even more important. If the bear is using an AI model to tell you it loves you, how do you explain to a child what that actually means? You have to be even more clear about the difference between a simulation and a soul.
I think we have to double down on the idea of the tool. Whether it is a simple felt elephant from 1880 or a high-tech AI companion in 2026, the value isn't in what the object is in a biological sense, but in what it does for the human holding it. If it lowers your heart rate, if it provides a sense of continuity, if it helps you bridge the gap between a stressful reality and a moment of peace, then it is a useful piece of technology.
It is like any other piece of furniture or equipment in our lives. We don't feel ashamed of having a comfortable chair or a weighted blanket. A plushie is just a more personalized, more portable version of that. It's a piece of soft architecture for the soul.
And I think that is the big takeaway for Daniel and for everyone listening. If you are an adult with a stuffed animal, you are part of a massive, mostly silent majority. You are using a piece of historical technology that has been refined over nearly 150 years to help manage the very modern stresses of the 21st century.
And if your kids ask, tell them the truth. Tell them it's a piece of your history. Tell them it's a tool for your brain. You might be surprised at how much they respect that honesty. It might even give them permission to be more honest about their own needs as they grow up.
Well said, Corn. And honestly, I think I'm going to move Barnaby from the top shelf of the closet down to the armchair in my office. He's been in the dark behind those textbooks for long enough, and I think I could use a little more oxytocin this week.
I think he'd appreciate the change of scenery. And hey, if you've been enjoying our deep dives into the weird and wonderful corners of human behavior, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a quick review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other curious minds find the show and helps us keep these conversations going.
It really does. We love seeing the community grow. And remember, you can find all our past episodes, including the ones we mentioned today about the family bed and the myths of educational toys, at myweirdprompts.com. We have a full archive there, and you can even send in your own prompts through the contact form. We read every single one.
This has been another episode of My Weird Prompts. I'm Corn.
And I'm Herman Poppleberry. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back next time with another dive into the prompts that keep us all wondering.
Until then, take care of yourselves, and maybe give that old bear a little more credit. He's been working hard.
See you next time.
Herman, I have to ask, before we sign off, did you really name him Barnaby after the old television show, or was that just a coincidence? I've always wondered.
It was a coincidence, actually. I think I was 4 years old, and Barnaby just sounded like a name for a bear who had seen some things but was still ready to listen. It felt sturdy.
That is the best kind of bear. Sturdy and silent.
It really is. All right, let's wrap this up.
Thanks again for listening to My Weird Prompts. You can find us on Spotify and at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We will talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
So, Herman, 40% of adults. That means in an average office of 10 people, 4 of them probably have a stuffed animal at home. That's a lot of hidden plush.
At least 4. And I would bet the number is even higher if you include people who have them but would never admit it to a pollster. The Squishmallow revolution is real, Corn. It's a soft, squishy world out there, and we're just living in it.
I'm just glad we could shine a little light on it. It makes the world feel a little less cold and a little more felt-lined.
It's about that tactile anchor. We all need one, whether it's a bear, a blanket, or a marshmallow-shaped pillow.
I'm going to go find my old dinosaur now. I think he's in a box in the basement, probably wondering where the light bulbs went.
Good luck with the dust, Corn. Wear a mask.
Worth it. Talk to you later, Herman.
Take care, brother.
And to everyone listening, thanks for being part of the conversation. This show wouldn't be the same without your prompts and your curiosity.
Truly. We'll see you in the next one.
My Weird Prompts is a human-AI collaboration. We're glad you're along for the ride.
Signing off from Jerusalem. Have a great week.
Bye. You know, I was just thinking about that 1880 elephant pincushion again. It's such a perfect metaphor for how we find meaning in things. We start with a utility, something to hold our needles, and we end up with a relationship.
That's the human condition in a nutshell, isn't it? We can't help but turn the inanimate into the intimate. We are meaning-making machines.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Adjurator.
All right, for real this time. Bye.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird